Hey there YouTube, this is Rajitha from Keep Calm and Read All, and welcome to the second part of Mid-June Roundup. Now in my first video I talked about the fact that June is the month of marathons, and in my last video I talked about the marathon that I did of Sherlock Holmes. The second marathon that I did this month was of the Bailey's list, the Bailey's shortlist for the prize for women's fiction. Now this year for 2017 there were some very interesting books up on the shortlist. For me, my personal favorite I think was The Power by Naomi Alderman, which won this year's Bailey's Prize for Women's Fiction. Now when I already knew the long list, and when I saw the short list, the first thing was that, okay, Atwood hasn't made it to the shortlist. Interesting. Then I saw the various lineups, like most of the authors whom I have not heard about. I think Stay With Me was the debut novel. Okay, but before we begin, let me just give a quick list of the different books that are there for the shortlist. The first one, of course, The Power by Naomi Alderman, Stay With Me by Ayobami Adebayo, The Sport of Kings by C.E. Morgan, First Love by Gwendoline Riley, Do Not Say We Have Nothing by Madeline Thine, and The Dark Circle by Linda Grant. Now for me, two books of this list were a complete standout. The first, of course, was The Power, and the second one was Stay With Me. These two books were so very enjoyable to read. The Power was a complete surprise to me. I think when I saw the lineup, when I read the blurb, I was like, okay, this is the only speculative fiction to have made it to the list. And really, speculative fiction, does it even belong here? Do you need does it need to be here? And when I started reading it, I'm like, yes, it does need to be there. This book really needs to be there. This book really needs to be read by everybody out there, simply because of the kind of scenario that it paints. For me, what I like about fiction, and especially anything to do with speculative or supernatural or fantasy or science fiction, basically are the worlds that could be, the worlds that could be made possible, the worlds that might happen, the worlds that give you an alternate view of history or of certain events that have happened, which is really amazing, simply because you're like, okay, this could happen, this could be a possibility. And I really liked the fact that she was so bold, so in your face. The idea of the woman basically discovering this power and basically deciding to do something about it. It's not what I have read in most superhero narratives, where once you get a power, you're supposed to hide it, you have to keep it secret from the rest of the world. Here it's the idea of sharing, the idea of showing everyone that yes, we do have this power and there is absolutely nothing that you can do about it. I mean, that scene in Moldova where basically these abused women share their power through holding hands. They basically pass on their power, they awaken the different the power within the different women, and then they march on against their captors. They basically, the Saudi Arabia scene where the women march out and basically topple the government that is there. That is what was amazing about this book, that the idea of revolution, the idea of a much needed revolution. And I loved the fact that she narrated it so well. She made that revolution come alive. That was, I think, one of the highlights of the novel, which is why I would recommend The Power to each and every one of you. The other thing that I liked was the fact how she turned around this idea of Christianity. She turned around the idea of Eve and created another Eve, this religion to Eve, the idea of Mother Eve. That was something interesting. Although I think that to a certain point it could have been maybe theorized a little better, but still, it was really interesting to read. What I didn't like about The Power was the fact that she, I think, went a little overboard with the reign of terror idea. This idea that any revolution eventually descends into chaos and anarchy, and that I think was one of the weak points of the novel. Yes, we know that revolutions do tend to go overboard. Sometimes they sometimes descend into bloodshed, but there have been instances in history of revolutions which have brought about a new world, which have has kept that world in check for a long amount of time. Here, that kind of a descent into anarchy was, I don't know, almost jarring when you start reading about it, and you are like, okay, you have shown us an amazing, a brave new world, and why are you doing this? Why are you doing this so quickly? Why are you so quickly degenerating it into chaos? And I am like, it sort of spoils the message. I think it sort of spoils the idea of a revolution, which she has done narrated so well in the novel. So that, I think, was my idea. It ended not with a bang but whimper. That was my main problem with The Power. The second book, however, Stay With Me, I think an amazing read from start to finish. I mean, the first line itself, when I read the first line, I was like, okay, I know this book is going to bring me to tears, but I am going to read it anyway. Let me read the line to you. I must leave this city today and come to you. And that line there itself, I'm like, okay, I'm going to enjoy this. And I did enjoy it. The story of Yajide was at turns heart-wrenching, at turns it irritated me that she was treated that way. This idea of focus on motherhood as if it's the only thing that makes the identity of a woman, that at times frustrated me. And I was like, okay, I understand the context of it, but still, it really annoyed me. I mean, is there no other way that a woman can be identified? Motherhood still remains the highest achievement that a woman can achieve for herself, and the story of Yajide is brutal in sending out that message. In fact, there is one line in the story where her mother-in-law basically tells her that you can be a bad wife, because I'm paraphrasing over here. You can be a bad wife, but you cannot be a bad mother. And I was like, okay, it's a little in your face, is what it is. But the character herself, Yajide, she is so strong. Even when she discovers Akin, her husband's betrayal, she is still so strong. She's basically, once she has her first daughter, she is that mother-child bond that I think was narrated so beautifully that it brought you so close to tears. Even the ending of the novel, it will bring you very close to tears. So you have been warned, but I'm asking you, I'm really recommending this book because it has been written beautifully. And Yajide, the character of Yajide was, she breaks your heart. The other four novels, I don't know, after going to such a high with these two novels, it felt like I was sort of coming down with the other four novels. The Sport of Kings by C.E. Morgan, although it has been narrated very well, the various descriptions in the novel, the various sights, sounds, and smell, the various character flaws that she captures in the novel has been actually very well written. It's actually a very good structural accomplishment. But in terms of the story itself, after a certain point, it just basically was like, okay, I see where you're going, and All right. I don't know. I didn't connect with it as much as I connected with Stay With Me or The Power. What I felt was at some points, I was really impartial, in the sense I was removed from the narrative itself, removed from the emotions of the narrative, as reading about, okay, Morgan has done very good character studies of her different characters which inhabit the novel, as in talking about various events, the various ideas of her horse rearing. Those were very nicely written, but that's it. Like, it felt like a structural accomplishment and not so much as an emotional connection, which I think could have been worked upon a little more. The next novel in the Bailey's shortlist was Do Not Say We Have Nothing by Madeline Thyme. Again, I really loved the idea of using a fairy tale motive, using the using folk elements in the narrative in order to talk about a certain political movement. That, I think, was the best part of Do Not Say We Have Nothing. When you read the stories of Big Mother Knife, then The Dreamer, Sparrow, then you realize, okay, this is actually very interesting, and it is actually very interesting to read it as well. What I felt was little jarring in the novel was the fact that she spent so much time on the folk element. She spent so much time narrating the history of Big Mother Knife, Balu, Sparrow, that when we come back to the contemporary events that are happening, it just felt a little disjointed. You're like, okay, yeah, right, okay, this is what it was, okay, and then you're like, okay, let me just refresh my memory. So there are times when I actually had to go back and read the contemporary narratives in order to understand, or in order to remember what exactly was going on. Then of course, there was First Love by Gwendoline Riley, and this book had an, how should I put it? This book was, in sense of the existence of Neve herself, the narrative was brilliant. Like the way Riley talked about unaccounted for people, unaccounted for people inhabiting the margins of the society, people keeping themselves to the margins of the society, people going about their solitary existence, anonymous and completely, yeah, completely removed from normal relations, normal day-to-day relations. That, I think, was one of the accomplishments of First Love. The idea of this individual who is lost in the society, who's no, of course she doesn't, there are times when even she herself feels that kind of a loss, but that kind of an almost pathological lonely existence was very beautifully woven into the narrative. That idea of unaccounted for, it still is running in my head when I think about that book. The idea that you are not leaving, uh, you're not leaving anyone behind. At some point, at one point of time, that's what I felt. Would anyone remember these unaccounted for people? That is what was going on in my head. The other element, or the other storyline in this novel, is Neve's relation with her husband Edwin, and that was something that I was like, okay, a little run of the mill, I guess, because I really liked the unaccounted for part, but this was like, okay, yeah, that's pretty much what I thought. I don't know if I can elaborate it a little more without like giving away major spoilers, but that is what I thought about First Love. The final novel was The Dark Circle by Linda Grant, and this was this was actually very interesting. I mean, I think I would have preferred the characters to have stayed in the sanatorium. They're basically committed to the sanatorium because they have got tuberculosis, and that's what I felt like. Maybe they could have expanded on the that's those scenes where there were some interesting scenes where the suffering of the body, the suffering of these people who have contracted tuberculosis, that could have been done a little more. That could have been discussed a little more, but the narrative itself felt very disjointed. One moment they are celebrating the end of war, the next they are protesting against rationing, then suddenly you have these characters committing themselves to the sanatorium because they have tuberculosis, then suddenly all these characters have taken um, a cruise somewhere, and finally you see one of the two characters actually getting married, and then you realize, okay, what exactly has happened in this narrative, what exactly is going on in this narrative. And that is basically what I felt like. In the end I am like, okay, so basically you can see that I had two novels that I absolutely liked, and four novels which I think could have it was, they were certainly interesting reads, but I might recommend First Love by Gwendoline Riley. But the other three, they are they are good books, but yeah. Hmm. So anyway, that is my roundup of the Bailey's list. Did you have any favorites for the Bailey's list as well? If you want to read up on my review of The Power, if you want to read up on how I marathoned through the Bailey's list, please check out my blog. The link is in the bio. And please let me know what you thought of my marathoning. And yeah, that's all for tonight, folks.